So, hello, welcome to Storytime 69, November story for this year. We had some lovely topics today, one of which is about remembrance and memories and so on, and lots of people have lovely things, particularly sent to the chat on those points. But our other one was much sillier. We had a lot of potato related stuff. It began with a request from P for jacket potatoes with a variety of toppings, and moved on to also include strong potato opinions or references, other things you can do with them, like art printing, making electricity, like a little bit of energy from them, carving them into jack-o'-lanterns because people were thinking about Halloween and spirits and so forth. So we're doing jacket potatoes today. Mine are in the oven now, and we're going to have them for lunch afterwards. So I'll add my pictures later. But there have been some good pictures in the chat. Is anyone actually eating jacket potatoes? Not yet.
We've eaten ours.
Eaten them. They're gone. Being consumed. Well, they did look delicious with asparagus on. So
yeah,
Yes, I would have had them.
yeah.
So then we had a bunch of things relating to ancestors, family history, and remembrance. I don't know if anyone's brought heirlooms or things with memories attached along with them. They're called. Oh yeah, Tegan's got her necklace on. It's beautiful. Can we see?
Got ours behind you.
It's a bit dark in here, but
yeah, no, that's a pretty good view of it. It is really unique, gorgeous snowflake like.
yeah. So yeah, as far as I'm aware, none of my grandparents or great aunts' things were ever, fancy brands or worth anything. But I'm just like, this goes with everything I wear. That's amazing,
Impressively you, as though you've inherited a little bit of style from from ancestors. That's lovely.
Yes. And although I'm not sitting in it, we do have, that's the rocking chair
yeah,
that I sent a picture of. So Dad was saying that those arms are actually made for like breastfeeding women to be comfortable to rest.
Oh, right.
Like their arms on, because they're a bit bigger arms than usual for a rocking chair. But I'm not entirely sure if that's the truth or if it's just a story, but yeah.
It's an interesting point. Which parts of the family story associated with objects are true and which parts have evolved in the telling. Having moved to the other side of the world, we didn't bring a lot of things like that with us. I realized just as I came on the call that I do actually have my Nana's ring, or two of her rings, in a little jewelry box in my room, so I can send a picture of those later. But the main thing that I thought of when I was trying to think, do I have anything like that, is actually the blanket, which I've told the story of before, but it wasn't, Grandma didn't make this. It was found in an op shop, but it went very beautifully with her house that Grandpa built and was for many years in her house. And then I lived in her house and had this blanket, and it got many chew holes from our rabbit at the time. And it was one of very few things that I really valued, having sent over to the UK in sea freight, which took like 4 months to come. Most of the stuff, when it turned up, it was like, why did we send this? Now we've got to store it and we don't have anywhere to put it, and we've already bought new things because we needed them earlier. But the blanket has become the Storytime blanket, and that's come from Grandma. I think Mum found it in an op shop for her, so it's kind of a whole family story. And this one is knitted by Lloyd's grandma, so that's a recent one, but it has come from the ancestors, as it were. And you've got some bits in the background, haven't you, Mum and Dad?
Yes, we've got all our, well, not all of them, of course. When we started gathering them together, I thought, oh my God, I've got an enormous number of these things. And I thought, we've been shedding so much. I thought we'd got rid of huge amounts of things. But yeah, we've got all the things that I listed on the messenger thing.
We can show them up a bit closer because you took.
So you can show them later,
didn't you?
But, yeah.
They're lovely. Lots of them are teapots.
Yes, there are teapots and coffee pots.
As it
and
happens,
cups.
that fits very well with the story.
Yes.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
Emily and I both have travel story mugs that are mementos of
that's nice.
travels around the world.
Yeah.
This one comes from Belfast, from a lovely pottery place that are also a charity for people with autism spectrum things. And they get them doing pottery, but also raise funds with their beautiful pottery that they make, and other people going and doing classes and things like that. Anyway, so in relation also to the kind of general heading of ancestors, family history, and remembrance, we had, of course, remembrance itself. Finding or being given an ancestral item. So somebody sort of says, I think I've got your grandma's whatever. Name history change. So the way that surnames or names change over time and become potentially something quite different, or it's named after something, but the name morphs or the spelling changes, and it can be quite hard to trace your family history. And returning things to their rightful owner or place. And then we had some other not related to those headings bits. One was a request for Albie in a group project at uni. So we've got character Albie doing that. Posting things in the wrong group or to the wrong person when you're sending messages. Accessing the inaccessible. Identifying a creature in your space based purely on droppings. When you don't have the right tools to do the job, and what the rain reveals. Kind of inspired by the big amounts of rain and stormy weather that we've had here in the UK. And I've sent some pictures or posted some pictures of some of what happened to the Riverland Valley here, which I can put a few of those up on the screen when I edit this recording, because it is quite amazing what the water did. So the poem I've got today relates to that, what the water reveals, and also kind of to history and how those things can interrelate. Because here in our valley, the Riverland, it's just down the hill from us, there's a lot of history of industry. People used to have mills there and do all kinds of making and work in that valley. It's now become a very beautiful nature trail that a lot of people escape into nature down there. But when the rains dramatically flooded the river, it kind of excavated a lot of extra bits of those industrial remnants, and you can see various things that were not visible previously, covered up with rocks and earth and roots and things. So this is called Storm Waters. The waters tore the present free and sent it downstream, power shifting from sparking lines to waves washing away the weight of stones. And under the deluge of today were pieces of our past, wheels turned with the weight of our ancestors, a remembrance in roots and storm cloud colours. So our story today has a long title, and you'll see the point. It is The White Cedar Flat Sagas, The Return of the Pot and Kettle. The white cedar outside the window of the first floor flat scraped clawing branches against the glass as the storm threw raindrops like missiles in the wind. Albie wiped the drip from his forehead and looked up at the ceiling. It was high and old-fashioned, with plaster swirls and roses around the light fitting. Not reachable by standing on the second-hand chairs he'd brought with him from the garage sale around the corner. An access panel near where the drip had come from suggested that there was a loft, or at least a crawl space of some kind. Perhaps the estate agent had mentioned something like that. Albie found that he didn't really take in everything people were saying if they were too interesting in other ways. The agent had had an earring that looked like a tiny dragon curling around the side of their earlobe. And this was the main thing Albie remembered from the viewing. A tap at the door stopped him from beginning a Google search for an ear dragon of his own. He opened it to find a young woman with rather out of control, rain-soaked strawberry blonde curls, too many bags, and a wet t-shirt clinging to her black sports bra, which said, "Cats. Cats are nice." Her arrival should not have come as a surprise to Albie, but he'd been distracted by ear dragons and the dripping ceiling, and thus stood looking at her in confusion for a moment. Hi, said the girl after a moment's awkwardness. I'm Jen Hubble. We've been emailing. The context for Jen swooped back into Albie's brain, banishing ear dragons and storms, and he launched himself into the open doorway and bestowed an Albie hug on her. Albie hugs were squishy and sudden. No, said Jen, as though answering an unasked question. I do not want a hug. I only know you from the uni discussion boards and emails in which you seem to feel like it's your job to offer Zen quotes. She disentangled herself from Albie's embrace and hauled one of her many bags through the door. I've been here for 10 minutes, Albie told her, moving his own bag into the kitchen area to make room for her. And apparently the roof leaks. He pointed to the corner next to the access point in the ceiling. Jen groaned. I thought you said you viewed the place and everything looked good. Albie raised his palms. The real estate dragon had an ear agent. Jen looked at him for a long moment. Where's the email and phone number for the agent? She asked, when it became clear that Albie wasn't going to elaborate. Albie went and got the folder from the cupboard under the sink. It had been one of few sensible places for documents in the as yet unfurnished space. You and the other flatmate have to sign things, he informed her. The agent will come back tomorrow. Jen took the document folder and started flipping through everything. Well, we probably shouldn't tick the box saying everything is fine in the living room, she pointed out, rolling her eyes and taking the pages to the kitchen counter to scribble over Albie's tick and write a comment. Several hours later, Jen's bags were mostly unpacked in one of the bedrooms, with the slight issue that she didn't have any drawers or a bed yet. What's this? Albie heard her saying as he returned from the $2 shop with a bucket. Whether Jen was talking to him or to herself was as yet unclear. Pooh, she continued, in a tone that seemed too enthusiastic for the word. Who is our secret tenant then? Albie wandered over and stood in her doorway. Why are you saying poo? Jen stood up from where she'd been creating some temporary box drawers in the bottom of the built-in wardrobe and held out her palm. In her hand was a dark brown oblong, which Albie was reasonably sure wasn't a chocolate bullet.
Oh.
Possum or rat? Jen asked, screwing up her eyebrows into squiggly quizzical lines as she peered at it. Albie leaned back. I'm not sure we want either of those in the flat, he said. And I'm not sure you want to be holding the poo. Jen looked annoyed. I'm studying veterinary science. It's good for me to take an interest in things like this. Albie shrugged. Personally, he didn't see the attraction of poo, but it already seemed like he'd irritated Jen, and he didn't want to get off to a bad start with his new housemates. Jen put the poo on a saucer in the kitchen for safekeeping, and the two of them went on a furniture shopping expedition. At the Red Cross shop, the options for low-budget desks, shelves, and sofas were not as plentiful as Albie had been hoping. He and Jen stood looking at a scarred and pockmarked wooden desk with a single drawer and knobbly carved feet which was the only one that really seemed both large enough and low-priced enough to suit temporary university student furnishing requirements. "I saw it first," claimed Jen, which Albie thought was completely untrue. "I liked it first," he threw back, in a lame attempt to stake a claim to it. Suddenly, Jen's eyes wandered up from the furniture to focus on something behind the counter. "Dog!" she exclaimed, and without any further concern for who was getting the desk, ran over to introduce herself to the canine. Albie wandered off to look at teapots and mugs, despite the fact that crockery was one thing both he and Jen already had some of. He liked to think about who the objects had belonged to in the past, and what sorts of conversations might have been had over the tables they'd once sat on. He spent enough time doing this that if Jen had really wanted the desk, she could have claimed it. And then he bought it, arranging delivery for later. Jen was still patting and talking to the dog when he was done. Albie thought she seemed to like animals, and even their poo, rather more than him, and he hoped they weren't going to be incompatible. After a visit to IKEA to order bed frames and mattresses, Jen went back to the flat to wait for the deliveries, and Albie went to campus to get on the internet and register for his classes. The rain had formed crisscrossing rivers over the Monash car parks, revealing all the uneven surfaces not normally apparent, and distinguishing wearers of valuable shoes who leapt, wobbled, and dodged in their attempts to stay dry. Most of these were local students who'd driven here and who, Albie assumed, got to go home to already assembled beds and family and local friends. He wondered, not for the first time, why he'd thought it was a good idea to study interstate, a decision relatively rare among his Australian peers. It occurred to Albie on his way back from campus that it might not have been a good idea to let Jen receive all the deliveries. The desk would be among them. What if Jen took it and put it in her room, even though Albie had paid for it? He didn't want to argue with her on their very first day in the flat together. When he arrived, however, he discovered that this was not a problem, because Jen and the delivery person had been unable to get the desk inside.
Oh.
"He said we'd have to unscrew the legs to get it through this door," Jen explained, indicating the door into the ground floor entryway. "But I don't have screwdrivers. Do you have screwdrivers?" Albie looked at her, wondering how she thought he would have acquired tools, and shook his head. "What about rope?" asked Jen, looking up at the rickety balcony that jutted out from their flat like an angular shelf fungus. Luckily for the balcony, and probably for Albie and Jen, one of their ground floor neighbours stuck their head out of their window at this point and offered to help. The desk was disassembled, taken inside in pieces and laid on the floor of the living area, where their neighbour left them with his screwdriver set to do the reassembly while he went away to cook dinner. When the desk was reassembled, it would not fit through either of their bedroom doorways. Jen looked at it with folded arms, as if its failure to be claimed by either of them was its own fault. "It would fit nicely under the window," Albie pointed out, cautious in case this too made Jen cross. "Then any of us could use it, depending who's home." Jen's annoyed expression faded to one of neutrality. "Yeah," she replied. "Okay." They worked together to shift the desk under the window, setting one of Albie's garage sale chairs at it with a view of the dripping branches of the white cedar beyond. Jen looked out of the window. "Cat!" she cried, dashing for the door and rushing downstairs. Albie watched out of the window as his new flatmate navigated the small, wet patch of lawn in her socks to meet a tabby that was perched on top of one of the wheelie bins, and shook his head. Albie had, on a few occasions in his past, been accused of being over-enthusiastic about things. He felt that when it came to animals, he might have met his match in Jen. He wasn't sure if this made them more or less likely to get along, and hoped, secretly, that his second flatmate might be calmer. The next morning, it was still raining, and the white cedar still thrashed against the window, its golden-coloured fruit beating like drumsticks on the glass and falling to the lawn below. Whilst he'd been warned that rain was the norm in Melbourne, Albie was unprepared for such miserable weather in March and dug through his belongings for the comforting fleece of his giraffe onesie. Wrapped in its fluffy embrace and protected from the chilly floor by woolly socks, he braved the short shuffle to the kitchen and retrieved the tub of ice cream he had ensured was one of the first things in the new refrigerator. Fetching a spoon, he took the whole tub with him into the living room and stopped when he saw a figure sitting at the desk under the window. It was not Jen. Feeling that perhaps eating ice cream straight out of the tub in a onesie was not how he wanted to be seen by somebody for the first time, Albie tried to retreat backwards on the soft toes of his woolly socks. But the figure at the desk looked up and smiled. It was a slow smile which replaced an expression of sad wistfulness, and Albie stopped regretting his morning's decisions and owned them instead, stabbing the spoon into the ice cream and stepping back through the doorway. "Hello," he said with a sleepy grin. "I'm Albie." The girl, who had a TARDIS pin on her cable knit jumper and dark hair tucked neatly behind her ears, stood up and held out a hand. "Alina Lorenzi," she said, "linguistics student and your second flatmate." A loud drip punctuated their introductions, and both turned to look at the bucket, which had filled up 2 centimetres overnight. "Jen said the estate agent's coming back today," Alina remarked, going into the kitchen. "They'll note that leak and make the landlord fix it, right?" She put on the kettle that Jen had supplied and picked up a tin from the countertop that hadn't been there yesterday. "Do you like chai?" Albie grinned and ate a large spoonful of ice cream. "Yup," he answered, around the mouthful, responding to both questions in one. The agent, however, whilst they made a lot of notes about the leak and the possible additional animal tenant, did not thereafter return Jen's calls or emails. It soon became apparent that the 3 students would have to attend to these problems themselves, at great risk to their rental deposit. On Monday, everyone had their first classes, so the bucket had to remain, and no further investigations of the source of the wardrobe droppings could be made. Albie was excited, though. Today was his first day as an official student of philosophy. He would soon be wise and zen and unable to be perturbed by such minor inconveniences in life as leaky ceilings and possible rat visitors. He entered his first tutorial with a bounce in his step, clad in an outfit he felt screamed philosopher, which involved a brown patch suit jacket worn over circus-style voluminous trousers. The looks he got from his peers were not quite what he'd been hoping for, but it wasn't very zen to care, so he tried his best not to. The tutor was a tall, lamppost-shaped individual with round glasses and a black duffel coat. After he'd made everyone introduce themselves and why they'd chosen philosophy, the next words out of his mouth were, "Now, for our first exercise this semester, we'll be doing some group presentations." This was met with a few quiet groans and whispers of people asking to work with those they already knew in the class. "Groups will be chosen at random." More groans this time, as those who thought they'd be working with friends added their voices. as will topics. Albie didn't groan at the tutor because that would be mean, but he did feel worried. Group projects had never worked out all that well for him at school. People objected to his enthusiasm, but then were so lacking in it themselves that nothing got done if he tried to let others lead. Still, this was university. Everybody here had chosen philosophy. Perhaps he would find himself with some new partners in enthusiasm. After his group had been drawn, Albie went up to pull out a topic for them. He drew the role of memory and remembrance in philosophy, and all but launched himself at his group members, saying, "Does remembering your experiences make you you? What is it to remember or be remembered? Do we have a duty to remember or a right to be forgotten? Hey, what if we made our presentation a play?" The group, understandably, were a bit taken aback by this monologue. Unlike the many groups he'd worked in at school, however, some of them did seem to find him entertaining, and one guy even said, "Yeah," when Albie voiced the play idea. Therefore, Albie thought he had sufficient encouragement to take the project to a new level of teamwork. "Want to have a dinner and brainstorming session?" he suggested. "I can bake loads of jacket potatoes and you can bring your own toppings." "Jacket potatoes are the worst potato meal," complained a girl named Ellie. "Like, you're not doing anything to them. Why not just have hot chips?" Other people in the group made various exclamations of horror or agreement. Someone else said mashed potato should get worst potato dish award. The rest of the tutorial was not really about the role of memory and remembrance in philosophy at all. "Maybe bring along a story about someone you want to remember or an object with memories attached," Albie suggested with rather less confidence as they packed up. "Then we can discuss the meaning around those acts of remembering." A few people made non-committal sounds of semi-agreement, and then they all went off their separate ways. Albie spent his free hour after the tutorial creating a group chat for the group, looking up papers on their topic, and pondering his photo archives and what, if anything, they said about who and what he most wanted to remember. When Albie got home, Jen was standing on the desk, which she and Alina had pushed into the middle of the living room. Jen was trying to push on the access hatch into the loft with a broom and kept wobbling so that Alina had to grab her feet and steady her. As Albie watched, Jen managed to lift the hatch a small amount, and several oblong droppings, like the one she'd found in her wardrobe, fell out and bounced off her head. "Aha," she declared, "so our furry friend is living up here." She persisted a little while longer with the broom before they all realised that there wasn't much point in getting the hatch open. Since they didn't have any kind of ladder, they would not be able to look into the loft, let alone climb up and investigate inside. "Maybe our neighbour who loaned us the screwdrivers has a ladder," Jen suggested, with a guilty glance in the direction of the screwdriver set, which still sat on the kitchen counter. "Worth a try," Albie agreed. "I need to fix the leak before my project group comes over on the weekend." Jen and Alina both swung around to look at him, and Jen, who for some reason had not got down from the table yet, lost her balance and fell on Alina. Fortunately, Alina saw this coming and did a reasonable, if not very comfortable, job of catching her. "You invited people over?" Jen exploded when they were both upright at floor level. "We don't even have a sofa yet. Besides, don't you think you should ask your housemates first?" "Sorry," said Albie, shuffling his feet. "Are you going to attempt to feed them?" asked Alina. "And if so, what?" "Jacket potatoes," answered Albie, somewhat glum. Yes, exclaimed Jen, the best potato food. Basically, anyone can adapt it to their dietary requirements. It's cheap, and you can get away with making them in an oven, microwave, or even fire.
That's it. Yeah.
She eyed the old fireplace that was set into the wall of the living room. No, said Alina, we're not making a fire. We're already trying to fix the ceiling ourselves, inviting a load of uni students over, and trying to work out what's living here with us based on the occasional bit of poo that Jen is now collecting in a jar. A fire is just asking for trouble with the landlord. Jen narrowed her eyes. If they didn't want us using the fireplace, they should have filled it in. It was agreed that they should try asking the neighbour for a ladder. And Jen prepared to go downstairs to do so, while Albie went to buy potatoes. If you work out what's leaking, let me know so I can get stuff to fix it, he told the others. Maybe we need a housemates group chat. The others agreed, although Jen did look as though she had reservations about it. And Albie and Jen set off to do their respective jobs, while Alina finished unpacking. Albie picked up 4 kilograms of potatoes and juggled them, realizing he'd done things in the wrong order, as he had a look in the supermarket's hardware and tools aisle. A lot of things there looked very useful. Unfortunately, he knew what very few of them did. He started messaging the group chat with queries. Do we need liquid nails? What are spanners for? Nobody replied. So Albie bought gaffer tape, batteries, and some string, because these were things he thought were always useful. When he got back, arms sore from carrying potatoes everywhere, Albie found Alina nervously holding a ladder and Jen invisible, apart from one foot hanging out of the loft. Why didn't you answer my messages? He asked them. What messages? Replied Alina with a frown, glancing at her phone. Albie unlocked his screen and waved the message thread at her. I was asking... Oh. Underneath his questions in the group chat, someone who was not Jen or Alina had messaged back, "Are you drunk, mate?" with a crying with laughter emoji. The chat, to which Albie had sent questions about tools, was his philosophy group project chat. He did his best to explain his mistake, but Albie couldn't help but feel that he'd rather lost the group's respect. Is something up here? Jen called down to them, shuffling further into the loft space on her bottom. A rat or a possum? Alina asked. Neither, answered Jen. An object. There was some scraping and scrabbling from above, and Jen's hands reappeared out of the hatch, holding a very dusty, very large copper kettle, of the sort that might have been used directly on an old wood stove. As she handed it down to Alina, the kettle tipped, and a big slop of cold, old, tea-coloured water splashed into Alina's hair. Alina made a gagging sound and took off for the bathroom. Albie steadied the kettle and took it from Jen, placing it on their desk. Jen, was this lying on its side up there? He asked. Yeah, replied Jen, in the corner. Do you think the dripping could have just been from that? Albie mused. Why would someone take a full kettle of water into the loft and leave it there? There were sounds of Jen crawling about. Maybe it was some kind of superstition of whoever lived here before us, she said. There's a horseshoe here, which also sounds like a superstitious thing. Ah! She clattered about a bit. Then she murmured, Hello, is this your house, Mr. Poss Poss? Oh, is that your bed? What a good nest. Oh, you've bitten that hose thing. Did you want a drink? Is that what the kettle was for? Maybe if we give you a bowl. She shuffled around some more, and her head appeared in the opening. I found the possum. I was right. I think the previous inhabitants might have used the kettle to fill a water bowl for the possum. But the bowl's gone, and there's a sort of hose running through which has a little hole. I think the possum just wanted a fresh drink. Albie looked up at her in amazement. The people here before us encouraged a possum to live in the roof. Jen made a face. Why not? She tilted her head. Anyway, we need plumber's tape for the little hole and a stable water bowl for the possum. Albie folded his arms. I don't think we should encourage the possum to stay. Why can't it go outside to find water like all the other possums? Jen pouted at Albie from above. I like him. We're not getting our deposit back, Albie sighed, going to get a spare dish. He gave Jen a small piece of apple too, although, he told himself, he did not approve. I didn't get plumber's tape because you didn't answer my mess. Oh. Albie remembered about his text thread mistake. Downstairs neighbour? Alina asked, coming back out with a towel on her head. Downstairs neighbour, Jen agreed, and Alina turned and went dutifully down to ask for plumber's tape. Meanwhile, Albie was examining the kettle. This is really old, he remarked. I don't think whoever left it behind meant to do that. They must have forgotten where it was. It seems like something that would have a lot of memories attached to it. He took the kettle into the kitchen and tipped out the water, rinsing it carefully and then turning it upside down to drain. On the base of the kettle was an inscription, Apris. This could be a surname, Albie mused. Maybe we could ask the estate agents if they could pass a message to the people who lived here last. Jen hung her head out of the loft and gave Albie a sceptical look. Good luck. She considered. You'd probably have more luck with a phone book. I saw one jammed in that weird skinny cupboard in the corner. Probably impossible to get it out, though. Albie knew the cupboard she meant. It was built into the awkward corner between the kitchen and living room doors, an extremely narrow space that would have better suited an umbrella stand or a very tall, thin coat rack. The cupboard door could only open if both the kitchen and living room doors were closed. The person accessing the cupboard would then find themselves in a very awkward-shaped hallway space, just big enough to stand and open the door, but not really big enough to maneuver around at all in order to reach things in the cupboard, which was unfortunate since it was also inexplicably deep. Thus, the previous occupants of the flat had abandoned a few things that had slid right to the back as simply inaccessible. Among these items was an old white pages book, certainly irrelevant now, but potentially holding clues about past residents of the building. The flat technically had a landline phone line, though Albie, Jen and Alina hadn't bothered to connect a phone to it. If Albie found that number was listed alongside the surname Apris, it would at least confirm his idea that the kettle belonged to a previous inhabitant of the flat. While Albie was considering how he might prize the white pages out, Alina returned with plumber's tape and handed it up to Jen, who fixed the hole. Bye, Pos, she whispered as she climbed back down the ladder. Do we have, like, an extendable duster stick or something? Albie asked. Alina and Jen looked at one another. I'm not going downstairs to ask to borrow more stuff, Jen told him. Try the broom handle. What was really needed was something like a giant pair of tweezers, Albie thought, as he poked and prodded the heavy telephone book with the end of the broom. It didn't help that only one person could fit in the little space between the doors at a time. We have to keep these doors open at all other times, Alina decided. That space is a door accident waiting to happen. No one is to put anything in this inaccessible cupboard. Albie agreed, especially after he finally prized the phone book out, only to discover there was no such name as a priest in it. Perhaps he'd been wrong about the engraving being a name after all. As the weekend approached, Albie started to receive quite a few messages on the Philosophy Project group chat from people saying they would still try to make it for potatoes and brainstorming, but they'd probably be late, or they weren't feeling 100%, or they might have to leave suddenly to deal with one issue or another. Still, Albie prepared. They didn't have a microwave yet, so cooking lots of baked potatoes was an all-day oven affair, which he could only do one tray at a time because they only had one tray. While he waited for the batches to cook, Albie created a little stage by the fireplace for practicing ideas for the play. He expected Jen to disapprove of this, but when she saw it, Jen jumped up and began reciting lines from Much Ado About Nothing, which resulted in them doing several scenes and Albie burning a few potatoes. Albie also pulled up all the old photos he'd asked his mum to scan for him on his laptop and flattened the cardboard everyone's bed frames had come in to serve as a big canvas for mind mapping. At 2 o'clock, the first outright cancellation message came into the group chat. After that, it seemed to be contagious, and people started to point out that if a lot of the group were missing, it didn't make sense to do much work on the project anyway. By 3:30, Albie's potato dinner and brainstorming session was cancelled. Jen and Alina had gone out, mostly to get out of the way, so Albie sent a message to their group chat. Group sucks, all bailed. To the group project members, he sent, more potatoes for me, mwahahahahaha. At 3:40, Albie got a message from Alina that was just a long string of potato emojis, followed by a question mark. Then he got 6 messages from members of the group project, which all essentially consisted of sad faces, apologies, and the occasional, I had a good reason. His mistake became obvious fairly quickly. Albie hoped the group would still work with him on the project okay, but he found that he wasn't all that bothered by his error. Perhaps his Zen philosopher temperament was kicking in already. It didn't, however, make up for pointless preparations. Albie put on his giraffe onesie. It turned out that after a moment's discussion, Alina and Jen had worked out that more potatoes for me, mwahahahaha, actually meant group sucks all bailed on their own. And they turned up back at the flat at 4 o'clock, carrying bags full of potential jacket potato toppings. Alina came over to where Albie was plopped down on one of the cushions he'd collected from op shops and held out her hands. Come on, Albie, let's have a potato and philosophy party, she said. You won't understand the philosophy, Albie told her sulkily. Do I need to? Alina asked. She towed him into the kitchen, where Jen was unloading ingredients for bolognese sauce, baked beans, cheese, margarine, pesto, tuna, sour cream, rocket, and assorted sauces. Isn't it just like why remembering matters to people? I think Jen and I can answer that question without having philosophy theories. Replied Jen, putting the potato tray Albie had removed back into the oven. I think our memories are our stories of how we became who we are. whether they're our own direct memories or those shared with us about our family history and stuff. And when people have moved on or passed on, or we've left a place or an activity or a phase of our life behind, remembering is the only way we can spend time with those people in those places or spaces again. I guess we all want people in the future to remember us too, because I think that's the most important mark we leave on the world, isn't it? At least the one that keeps on going the longest. You can build a big statue to yourself, but the world will grow over it eventually. People only really live on in other people's stories and memories. She paused, looking at the remaining potatoes in the bags. We have too many potatoes. Potatoes have more uses than eating, Alina remarked. Yeah. We could try to make some potato print art around Albie's mind map cardboard. True, Jen mused. It wouldn't really be a potato party if we didn't use them for all sorts. And it wouldn't really be a philosophy party if we didn't question the purpose of the potatoes. Alina picked one up and cut a circle in the bottom. If we're going to do like remembering people, isn't that sort of like old Halloween? Like spirits of our ancestors sort of thing? She began attempting to dig out the insides of the potato, and little pieces started flying everywhere. Potato jack-o'-lantern? She explained, holding up what really just looked like a potato with a hole in it. The others laughed, and then a clap of thunder sounded outside, and Alina looked very slightly perturbed. Maybe we should actually do some honouring of ancestors, Jen said. I do have candles, but does anyone have matches? There was a pause, while they all contemplated the idea of having to ask the downstairs neighbour. Then Albie had a sudden flash of memory. Oh, yes, I do. He bounded off to his room and dug through a shoebox full of assorted things that didn't quite belong anywhere else. If the power goes out, we'll have light. And if we're really sciencey, we might be able to get a tiny bit of power out of the spare potatoes, joked Jen. Yeah, but we don't want the power out if possible, please, ancestors, Albie said hurriedly. Otherwise, our potatoes for eating won't cook. Oh, good point, smiled Jen. They all settled on the floor cushions around Albie's laptop, and Alina gave everyone chai and put Jen's candles up on the mantelpiece. Are these memories you were going to think about? Alina asked, gesturing at the photo folder on Albie's screen. Yeah. Albie opened his favourite. This is my great-grandma, making tea for Mum and her friends. It's not my memory, but Mum remembers, and I value her remembering and telling me the story. So I was going to make the point that Jen did about carrying people's stories in our collective memories. Jen unfolded herself from the floor. Shall we light a candle for your great-grandma? Albie nodded and took the matches up to the mantelpiece. But Alina was peering closely at the photo, tapping on Albie's touchpad to zoom in. Albie, she murmured, after waiting for him to light the candle. I know this teapot. Albie went back to his cushion, pausing on the way to switch off a few lights so that the candle flame stood out brightly in the gloom. Yeah, they're special, those ones, he replied. No, like, not this kind of teapot. This teapot, Alina insisted. Albie frowned. It's probably not. That picture was taken overseas. I don't think my grandma brought her mum's teapot with her here. There must be some similar. No, Alina said again. This script on the side, I recognise it. She opened her own photos and scrolled through for a moment. Look, that's my sister, Tuya. Look at the teapot she's got on the table. Albie looked. Sure enough, Tuya's teapot did appear to match in every detail with the one in the photo of his great-grandmother. He blinked at Alina in surprise. Oh, wow, That's uncanny. It's yours, Alina said, opening her messages and typing something vigorously. Oh, no, I'm sure Tuya got it in a reasonable way, Albie told her. It's on a new journey now. No. Alina sat up straight on her cushion. To Tuya, this is just a teapot. She could use any teapot. She'd probably even like a new teapot. To you, and certainly to your mum, this teapot is history. It is memory. And I'm going to get it for you. She went back to typing. Albie gave her a sideways hug, remembering how Jen hadn't wanted a hug when she arrived. His eyes fell on the copper kettle, still draining by the sink. He went and picked it up. We need to find out where this belongs, he told the others. It could be generations old. It could be somebody's story. Alina set down her phone and held out a hand for it. Let me see the name. Albie put it in her hands. Alina ran her fingers over the engraved letters. A priest. This is Welsh. It's son of Reese, I think. A surname, but old. Names change a lot over time. She opened a Google search and typed it in. Here, see? It could be Priest or even Price now. See if the entry in that old white pages for our address and number is a Price. Albie flicked the heavy, dusty book back open. Emmeline Price. You're right. An extended search later, the three of them sat looking at Emmeline Price, previous resident of the White Cedar Flat, as evidenced by a number of photos on the local community news page, in which Emmeline, undertaking various acts of helping the community centre, stood at the foot of the white cedar tree that now tapped its branches against their window. We should put it in the post, said Albie. No return address. Just the kettle, going home. Alina nodded. I like that idea. They spent the rest of the evening with baked potatoes, topped with all kinds of mixtures, including one very polarizing attempt at a dessert potato. With memories described and shared and returned to life in their minds. And eventually with Rattle, the possum, who obviously expected them to be in bed by now and came out in search of leftovers. Possum, whispered Jen in much the same tone as she would yell, cat. Finally, everyone had to admit they could neither eat nor carve any more potatoes, and it was probably time for bed. Albie, Jen said, getting up and helping him to his feet too. When I arrived here, I thought you were a bit too much, but I think the three of us will be all right here for the duration of our studies. I have a feeling we're very lucky that we're renting here and not staying in the official student flats. Don't you? Yeah, said Alina. I think this is a place we'll make good new memories. Home is something you can create. And then Jen said, as if answering an unasked question, yes, I do want a hug. And Albie hugged them both. And that was the beginning of a lot of new things to be remembered.
Oh, beautiful.
Very good.
Oh, yeah. Oh, very good.
Beautiful story.
Did the
That's
group
very
end
fun
up
to
doing
hear.
anything for the project?
Yeah.
Oh,
Didn't do anything with
Did
the
Albie just end up doing it all based on what he and his flatmates did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, I feel like I've just done the assignment.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows
That
if
was beautiful.
the other group members will do any of the assignment.
I do
Yes,
love
I
the
feel like, I feel as though Jen and Alina might end up doing the assignment.
Yes.
It was really nice to hear the kind of origin story of that group,
Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
knowing that
when I
they
was
would all
asked
get
to
along in the end.
put Albie at university age, it just seemed like the most appropriate thing to do, and I kind of knew straight away I wanted to go back and do that origin story and that's why I gave it the title, is it the White Cedar Flat Sagas, and this is a particular piece of
Yeah.
story from there, because I thought, in the future it would be possible to have more sort of things, episodes that happened during their time, and living there. And I also really wanted to show kind of the other side, Albie's point of view of Alina, seeing him for the first time, because in the original Solstice, he describes, being at this flat that wasn't really home yet, and being at that old scarred desk, and then Albie came in the onesie with the ice cream, and so it sort of made her feel like this could be a home.
Yes.
It would be lovely thing, Sarah, at some stage in a future story to go where the teapot.
Follow the kettle.
Where the kettle, where the kettle is.
And see who that person is.
And be the receiver of that.
Story.
That would be really a nice
and hear the story of how Albie's grandmother's teapot ended up with the other person.
I think we should definitely have absurd hats.
Absurd cats.
Hats. HATS.
Hats. So we can wear absurd hats.
And there's a reason.
There's one in
Andrew, you're looking absolutely fascinating.
You like it? I made it myself.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice.
Very, very nice.
Fascinator.
There's the cup.
No, it's got actual cup. What else would we like for December's story?
Errant bowls.
What was that, Andrew?
Bowls that won't bowls that won't go on their correct bias.
Oh. What's it? Oh, as in yes.
Oh. Biased bowls.
Unbiased bowls.
Incorrectly biased bowls.
Correct. I saw a few today. They were hilarious.
All right. I
have one which I don't quite know how to explain or exactly what it is, because it's kind of a vibe. But so I don't know if you guys know, Olivia Rodriguez is a singer whose second album has come out. And one of the top 3 singles or most common songs that I've heard from it, the chorus is about saying like, I want to get him back. It's all like super catchy song. It's been in my head for like 3 days straight. But if you listen to the verses are all outlining how actually he was a terrible boyfriend. But then she's like in the chorus, but I want to get him back. And it's like this acknowledging the silliness of what you want, where you're like, this is a terrible idea, but I still want it. And I'm kind of accepting that what I want is not always logical.
Yes.
And slightly making fun with myself and slightly just actually going, oh, I'll do it. Like that kind of vibe of like your logical that is not quite right and not quite what you should want.
Of what you want. Yeah.
Sarah, how about the greatest ever song comeback? The Beatles have just released another song. It's gone number 1.
Oh, is that why they're in the news?
The greatest re-release of an old song.
Oh.
Correction.
Sorry,
artificial intelligence. It's a new song.
No, it's an old song, but it's not a previously released song.
No, they took John Lennon's voice and his recording and digitized it.
Yeah.
And separated from the keyboard and then mixed on top of that.
Remixed it.
Yeah, so they did their own drums, bass, vocals and strings over the original voice, which was just played on the piano.
Right.
There's
an old recording and they've redone it with modern tech.
So Sarah, and extending from that, like the power of editing would be good.
Yeah.
Because
and actually
thinking modern
at the same time of this is because Madness have released a new song, the Rolling Stones have released a new song. It's about the resurgence of the oldies. Do they ever go away?
ABBA. There was the ABBA album.
Yeah. ABBA had like a movie where they had like computer altered versions of themselves to look younger, so they looked like what the fans remembered and what they thought the fans wanted.
They did it as a live performance as well.
Yeah,
they
they
did
did.
a live performance with, were they holograms? Yeah, with holograms of themselves performing the songs. My dad went to see it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And ABBA
So it's
Voyager,
like
they do that.
watching,
Like their younger self, what they
their
like
younger selves. Yeah.
heyday,
Mhm.
doing
Yeah.
new songs.
Yep.
When you think about it, that's been used in cinema for a long time, where particularly when you get a historical drama
Yeah.
and they cross match old footage, say wartime footage, with modern acting, and that can be quite good. And so that kind of concept is kind of what were you trying to say there?
Well, what I was trying to say was that you can take previously really quite poor recordings and turn them into something else. They've just released a recording of Genesis, the original lineup, in a concert hall in Paris, which was done a long, long time ago, right in the early days when they were just formed, and they've enhanced the pictures, and then they've remixed the sound.
Yeah.
So a 2-track stereo tape recording.
Wow.
Broken it down into all the separate instruments by using EQ frequencies to separate them all out. So then they've got the bass on its own, the vocals on its own, this on its own, and then they've remixed it with modern techniques, and it sounds HD, super quality, like you produced it today.
Yeah.
You know? And the sound is great. And the funny part is, I know they played it live, and it was done because it was done on a VHS type tape setup, but it's actually better sound than what it would have been when you were there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they wouldn't have had the quality of
No,
stuff.
the PA and all that would have been rubbish.
Yeah.
Nothing like it is now.
Probably in some like very crap venue as well. Like a lot of venues are not ideal.
Yeah, no, PAs were useless in those days.
Like it's a big hall and it's really echoey and it's not.
They didn't take off till the 70s. That's when sound really took off. But the actual performances in the 60s and the early 70s, if you went to the concerts, it was nothing like what we can listen to now.
Yeah.
That's the joke. That's what I'm trying to say. It's like the past has been improved.
Take the past, and it is that. It's the real thing, but
it's even better than what it was.
That's quite nice. That's like a polishing the past.
Yeah.
Polishing the past. Yeah.
There was recently, wasn't there a thing where there were people doing duets, and they were teaming up with somebody from the past who they wanted to make a duet with, who maybe died, but they were there, and they were singing alongside them. And I can always remember that, thinking of who you would like to have a coffee with, who you'd like to sit opposite, and it may be somebody from wherever. It could be just. So who would I like to do a duet with? I don't know.
Yeah.
It'd be quite fun to find out. Who would Albie duet with?
Hopefully no one, because he's not very good at singing. So these topics sound a little bit like kind of a journey into the past via music and film and sort of resurgence of those things. And perhaps like dress ups as well, because we've got the elaborate hats and things. So maybe it's an era thing. So that sounds very interesting.
Can we put in as another little topic, if it works at all, comfort clothing? Because clearly
Albie and
his suit is a comfort clothing thing. So I'll put this on and make you feel better. Tegan's got a dressing gown, which is
as always
qualifies,
Well, we thought of one thing, but I think you kind of already covered it this time. Which was like unexpected extreme weather. But I think that was one of the ones you put into this thing.
Yes.
But if you want to do that,
that would be. It's always interesting having kind of environmental conditions interacting with the more human side of it.
Yeah. So because we had jump up to 40 degrees yesterday. So it was like
Mm.
24 and then, and then 40 and then back down to 19.
Yeah.
So there's sort of,
Weird.
I think maybe that's the thing we want specifically is like, you know, when a really hot or really cold day turns up kind of out of season and you're just not acclimatized to it yet. And it seems like just the craziest thing that's ever happened.
Yeah.
It whacks
When
you.
you go off in the morning and you're wearing everything, and you come back in the evening and everything's been taken off and you're carrying it.
Exactly. And all day you're just like, it is so hot though. It's just so hot.
That's
like it
interesting,
wasn't,
Emily, because
you know, like it doesn't happen every
eventually-
year or something.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So our next scheduled story is December 9th.
Yep.
I want to pop that in the calendar while we're here.
Sarah, can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
The sudden horror of doing a craft and realizing you've lost your needle.
Oh.
I recently bought magnets.
All the time.
And magnets. Yeah.
I recommend magnets.
Don't worry,
yeah.
I have found it, but I did just have that moment.
Oh, it's awful. And you think, is it in my sofa?
And it's just like suddenly don't move. Nobody move. Could be anywhere.
Lovely to see everybody. Thank you for joining in. And
Thank
Lovely.
can make it on December 9th.
Take care.
Fascinating. You're
See you later.
fascinating. All right.
Bye.
See ya.